Hello, sir. We are very eager to listen that, we are shooting the questions one by one, and I'm sure you'll be patiently answering our questions, and we are very eager to hear that. So, what are the recent developments or technological developments are there in MEP field? If you could so throw a light to our audience, so it would be great help.
Sure, I'll try my best. Uh, what has happened is most of the developments are related to the energy efficient equipment operation because in the recent past, the cost of energy has gone up and still going up, and also the energy sources are becoming rarer and
Yes,
more difficult to get. So, with that, and HVAC being the largest consumer of the power,
yes,
any saving that is achieved in the HVAC equipment in terms of operation will be a great saving in terms of the real effect. Like ABC analysis, what we do,
hmm,
practically two-thirds of the energy is consumed by HVAC systems.
oh, okay,
So even if you achieve 10% saving, it will be overall impact of 6% definitely.
yeah,
So the developments are more related to the controls which are now digital, unlike the sluggish or mechanical electrical controls in the earlier generations.
okay,
And with the electronic controls available at a lower price, it has become widely acceptable. And those are being incorporated even in the smallest system. Think of the window AC, which comes with a remote AC now or remote control, as
yes,
against the previous generations.
yes,
So the fundamentals requirements are still the same because they are not changed. Like you need a water at the tap or hot water for bath, and the AC with the comfort, refrigeration in the same way. So those basic requirements have not changed. What has changed is the way that is being designed because the software is available
okay,
and it gives you a faster and more accurate results in terms of the sizing or the selection of the equipment. So the complex buildings, they are simplified because there are softwares for load calculations, heat load calculations, and that results in the more economical selection of the equipment.
yeah,
And it also gives you a flexibility of reducing the overall size if you go for advanced systems. Like once you have the hourly analysis done, which was difficult in manual calculations, but the software, you have to just say okay, run it for the full year. Then what it does is every month it takes a sample day and 24 hours analysis is done, and that is taken as a representative for the whole month. But it gives you a feeling of what should be the peak and what can be the off peak. So the equipment sizing can be done more economically, and
okay.
software reduces the manpower required. Yes, you are
Oh,
saying something.
yeah, yeah. No, I was just listening, engrossed. So yeah, so these are the recent
Uh,
technological development in terms of energy efficiency and improvement in energy, so that efficiency, or so that we can save some energy being in the
you can
HVAC.
save the power as well as the installed cost. Means both
Installed.
operating and owning both you can reduce.
Okay. And
Then preparation of drawings. Autodesk, who has been leading that AutoCAD all software for drafting,
yes.
they had come up with a package which will help the design engineer to draft. And
Oh,
the drafting, while he is doing it, it goes on getting incorporated, and there are views available. I am not very sure whether it has become very popular in India. Yeah, when I was on a project for Lulu Hotels in Cochin on behalf of Voltas, we had procured a MEP 2015 AutoCAD package, and where the AC design, it becomes very easy because what you have to do is arrange the diffusers with the air quantities, and the ducting gets designed once you start connecting, go up to the fan.
okay.
So that was the kind of software that was available. While you do the plant room, types of chiller packages full details were available with
Okay.
the location of the piping connections, electrical connections. So your plant room planning becomes very easy,
Okay.
which was not available before.
Yes.
And when we wanted to do that manually, it will be taking more time, and there are still chances of errors which
Yes.
are getting eliminated. But it has a cost tag attached to that. And if you get an unlicensed version and try to open it on the licensed version, it says that you have prepared the drawing with unauthorized or unlicensed version, and you may have some difficulty with bugs and things like that.
Okay.
So I'm not sure because it was expensive software, but
Mhm.
since the project was of a high value, I had suggested to Voltas and they had procured that for the drafting purpose. So
Oh,
that was the another development. And even today, the other normal software also for drafting has got very many features which reduces the time for the draftsman. But unfortunate part is the old generation of draftsmen, they have knowledge, but they do not have the speed on the AutoCAD.
hmm.
Whereas the new generation, which has learned AutoCAD for drafting as an aid,
Yeah.
they have the speed on the AutoCAD, but they don't have the visualization of the site. So when you take a section and you tell him to draw a section, and I want to show all these equipments there, and with the piping, they get confused. So from ISHRE, I was associated with the developer, and we have prepared a specific training program
Mm-hmm.
for CAD draftsman people, which we will be conducting the sessions. And since that is like hands-on, we will be preferring to have a offline, means in-person kind of training. So that's
Oh,
what we are aiming
so
at.
it's like
Then there are programs available for monitoring the
okay.
project progress
Okay.
and also on commissioning,
Okay.
communications. So they are helpful for the project managers in principle. But all the same, HVAC project being a part of the main project, those engineers also have to be acquainted with that kind of software. Like Econex, for example, they have a common platform
Okay.
and access is given to all the parties involved, and they keep loading their data, and that gets approved there. That is being tracked. Basically, it helps in monitoring the progress. And if there is anything which has not come from a particular party, the reminders are sent in time. So that's how the things work. So, in my opinion, these are the main developments. These are not all technological, except for the controls and the equipment which has come in the recent past, which is more energy efficient. The basic approach to the design and application, fortunately, has not changed.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Thanks. Thanks a lot for this answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, if normally if you see the HVAC engineers are more focused and they are more running towards design and installation, but they try to neglect the aspect of the electrical engineering in their work or in their HVAC field. So if they neglect electrical and they only focus on the design aspect or the commissioning aspect, then what are the impact happens on their career?
Uh, yes, I would like to elaborate a bit on this. See, personally, I have a qualification in electrical. So I'm an electrical engineering graduate. But thanks to Voltas, I got induced in air conditioning and refrigeration division. And I realized that having learnt the electrical, learning mechanical was not that difficult. Because mechanical, you see, okay, the compressor is running, so we can see physically that is rotating. In electrical, everything is imaginary. We just imagine that the current is flowing, the voltage is there, and things like that. But in mechanical, things are easy to understand because they are physically verifiable. So, electrical engineers becoming HVAC engineers, I feel is easier. But mechanical engineer to become electrical or understand the electrical aspects, there is a challenge for him because a lot of things have to be imagined, and unless they are explained properly and understood by them in the correct perspective, it will be difficult for him. And most of the, or practically all of the equipment of HVAC, including controls and sensors and you name it, and it needs some electrical connection so that it communicates and then does the desired or the performance what it is required. Otherwise, the details of requirements for the HVAC in terms of the power, whether it is required for the control system or the main equipment, if it is not communicated properly, then there will be problems in making the provisions, because most of the times what I have seen is in the projects, there is a division of the scope of work. So there is always a battery limit, and HVAC contracts generally end up in having electrical work related to HVAC as a part of the HVAC contract,
Yes.
because it is always seen that HVAC people keep on adding some equipment, some heater, some sensor, and the electrical engineers get fed up that
Yeah.
every time they cannot, and the locations are also varied.
Yeah.
So what they do is, as a part of the consultant's design or even the simplifying the whole scope of work, what is done is electrical related to HVAC is thrown on HVAC contractor.
Mm.
And if the mechanical engineer who is handling that project particularly, he finds it very difficult to understand what are the requirements to be communicated to the electrical part. And many times electrical contractor who is a subcontractor under the HVAC, we have seen a tendency that they will take you for a ride
Mm.
because you do not know. Once they know that you do not know, then they will try to play with the figures and try to maximize the profit. So jokingly, we used to say HVAC contractor, Voltas engineer will go in an auto rickshaw to the site, and the electrical contractor will come in a Mercedes Benz.
But it-
So that's the kind of it's a sort of exaggeration, but this is what reality we have seen. And lack of knowledge is causing a repetition of work or duplication of work or delay in getting the work, or duplication in the sense, if you want to monitor the position and you actually need a three-way or three-core cable and you have laid a two-core cable, at the end you will end up in replacing that two-core with three-core. The cost of the cable is not much, but you will be duplicating the labor, and it always goes in small conduits in difficult accessible locations, and the routes for the control cables are the most challenging, more than the power cable. So if the HVAC engineer has got a good hands-on or knowledge of what are the actual system requirements, then it is easier for him to coordinate. He need not know in details what all things are required, but at least the major heads, he must know what all things are required and how the planning is done. Because once he knows how the planning is done, he can make sure that timely information is passed on and there are no delays. So that way, having knowledge of electrical will definitely help. The He will become a more uh, sought after kind of engineer, that yes, he is the person who knows what is required and he will give you the full information.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great explanation, and this will definitely motivate to many of the HVAC engineers to take the electrical aspect very, very seriously while they are working on their project.
I hope so.
Sir, HVAC and electrical are like, without the electrical, HVAC cannot work. So it's like a
Yes.
husband-wife relationship where both are dependent on each other. So would you please elaborate more that how this HV electrical field significantly impact the HVAC as a system or as an equipment or as a whole field?
Yes. uh, as we know, practically every equipment as a part of the HVAC installation or system, be it a compressor, be it a pump, be it a air handling unit, fan, you name it, and it needs a drive power. Because we know that unless you are given or driven by the motors, which are mostly electrical motors, the equipment of HVAC will not be able to operate or run and get the desired HVAC effect, which means that you need a electrical main power to drive the motors, which are in turn driving the HVAC equipment. So that will be the power part of it. And then we have controls. which will be a typical system, will be having a sensor, a controller, and an actuator as a group. So there will be so many groups within the system, which all of them will be requiring power. It may be a low voltage power, but it is still the electrical power, which means that you will have to segregate between the control part and the power part. And since controls require more human interaction or corrective actions when there is a defect, they are generally operated at low voltages, many times 24 volts, because lower voltage is not as risky for the human from the fatality point of view.
Yeah.
If it is a 440, then it is very much dangerous, and we cannot operate with those voltages at live. 230 volts also is dangerous, not as dangerous as 440, but 230 is also, it can become fatal. That's the reason why most of the control circuits are operated at low voltage. So even if you touch the live wire, it will not cause any error, means any inconvenience to you in terms of you will not get a shock. So you could probably, it will be only a tickling kind of thing. You know that yes, there is something happening. At times we have seen that static electricity, that shock is much higher. Like you get into a car, come out of the car and touch the edge of the door, you suddenly get the shock because you have come out of the car, which is the kind of resin seat.
Yeah.
And if you are wearing a woolen suit and you have rubbed the seat while getting out of the car and you touch the edge of the door, you will see that there will be a shock.
Yeah.
So that is a much higher voltage shock, which is more dangerous than the controls voltage which are there. But all the same, you need to have the correctly understood wiring, which is to be connecting the or interconnecting the main power with the drive motors or actuators and all the sensors and the controllers which are located throughout the building at various locations depending on their performance requirements. And that's where, after you have scattered all these equipments here and there, what is important is correct way connecting them. And if anywhere while pulling the wire or the cable, if there is a damage in the cable, it can lead to serious problems. If it is a control cable, you may not get a signal. And if it is a power cable, you may have not short circuit, but there will be overheating where the current conductor has got damaged because the cross-sectional area has reduced. What it results is the same current flows to the reduced area. With the result, the resistance being high, the insulation will melt because of the overheating, and that will cause a short circuit. So all the electrical installation, the power cabling in particular, if you are not having a proper space planning, we could land up in serious trouble. Many times what we have seen is a larger equipment like a chiller package, which comes with a higher power requirement. There are transition requirements like the package chiller. If it is an American unit, they generally give copper cable as a termination on the terminal, whereas the cables could be aluminum. Now the cross-sectional areas are different, and transition from the copper which is on the equipment to the aluminum which is from the field being supplied, if the transition is not taken care in the space planning, because they need clearances and larger spaces, and many times I have faced problem that in the plant room you don't have enough space for cable to be bent. Okay. And then if it gets pinched, then we have a problem of this conductor losing the cross section, and it definitely gives the overheating in the beginning and resulting into the failure later. So space planning, and that becomes very important, and that's where I have been talking about on the correctness of the drawings in terms of space planning. And till he knows that you need that space, he cannot go and tell the architect.
Yes.
So that's something which we need to keep an eye on.
Okay. So now again coming back to the favorite questions of many of our participants or many of our professionals, that okay, if they focus on the electrical knowledge and all, then what an extra edge or what are the extra career benefits they get of learning it? Everyone wants to learn it. That's a different story. But again, learning is something which they have to spend time on it, spend the efforts on it, resources on it. So everyone is curious. Okay, if I learn, then what are the career benefits or what are the other benefits they may acquire through it?
Most of the times, what I have seen while I was working as a construction engineer is many times when the HVAC engineer is only mechanical qualification and his experience, they will try to avoid the electrical problems, and they will say that okay, I will ask my colleague or my contractor to come and look at the problem. They will not get involved in even finding out what is the problem, because they want to avoid, like we used to say, that they will not touch with a 4 feet pole the switch. They will say okay, I'm sending my electrical engineer. Now the client gets annoyed. He says that I have called the electrical HVAC engineer all the way, and if he doesn't know this little bit and he has to depend on somebody, I am losing time. I am getting delayed in my project. And earlier, what used to happen is most of the installations were related to direct process or manufacturing. Not so many comfort applications we were handling. Most of them were industrial applications. So even one day's loss of production means a lot to them. There were clients who were saying that if I lose one batch, the rejection cost of that material being rejected can buy me 3 plants of yours.
Oh my.
That's the kind of losses associated with not having a proper refrigeration system.
Okay.
So troubleshooting is one of the aspects which will definitely be easier if the HVAC engineer has a knowledge of electrical, because these days mechanical equipments do not have so many mechanical faults like the
Mm.
bearing failure or the belt failure. Those kind of faults are forgotten now. So most of the times the faults occur in the simplest control systems. At
Mhm.
times the wiring could be wrong, the control wiring setting could be not done correctly, or it might need some fine tuning. So if it is a small problem, not really related to the main equipment, then the knowledge for the HVAC engineer in field, I'm focusing on the actual work being done in the field. If the engineer is present and he can identify, oh, this could be the problem, and that happens to be the problem, because most of the time what we have seen is the gut feeling what the engineer gets is the real indication, okay, this could be wrong.
Yeah.
And then solving that problem becomes easier, because the client most of the time may have his own electrical team with the, and like I said, these days controls and electrical has become more important than the mechanical equipment, which is like a pump or a air and unit fan or the compressor. Most of the times the problems come in the control box, which could be very silly problem.
Mm.
It could be identified, then a lot of time can be saved. And cost, if somebody has to go to a remote site, imagine the time and the cost associated with the travel.
Correct.
In Gujarat, we used to travel from Ahmedabad to Tata, the Mithapur. It
Mhm.
used to take 24 hours to reach by train that time. It was
Oh.
just a meter gauge train, and if I have to send a person, he has to board the train morning 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and he will reach the next day. So
Oh.
imagine the time spent in reaching there.
Yes.
And when I used to work in Bahrain, the people from UK used to say, oh, he has to take a flight and reach there in 6 hours. Bahrain is not far. That is the
Yeah.
kind of time you save now,
Yeah.
and the way they project.
Yes.
It's all depending on that, because I remember we were spending 3 days for half hour meeting in Mithapur
Oh,
because of the travel distances and times. But now, if the person goes and he can solve all the problems related and he can have the troubleshooting done, he
mhm.
is definitely, they will next time say, okay, don't send anybody else, send him only. It
Correct.
has happened with me. So, since I have gone through that, I can share
Yeah.
this with you, not a problem.
Yeah.
And like I said, these days the equipments, mechanical parts, they do not need much uh, troubleshooting. It is most of the time in control, wiring,
Mhm.
wrong connection, or not understanding the requirements correctly. So that way, definitely the HVAC engineer with the controls plus electrical, if he learns that, it will definitely add a value and he will be more in demand, I would say, that yes, he will be able to do two people's job at least.
Okay.
So that way, I think it will be helpful.
Sure. Definitely. That's really a great knowledge you have shared about it. Sir, we wish to ask one more that now soon we are launching a course on the electrical engineering specific to HVAC engineers. So, what are the extent of all we are covering it, and would you please explain that about how it will be, what are the topics we'll be covering with these people, and what are the practically how it will be useful for them, so that will help our community.
Okay. Uh, to be frank, such training sessions, personally, my feeling is it would be better to have a in classrooms type session. But knowing the trend and the scattered locations and the individuals, feel that that may not be possible now. So we may have to go to something which is uh, online, what we had during the COVID, work from home type. So whenever you require, you can have access.
Yes.
The only difficulty will be the same thing they may have to read twice or listen to that twice, thrice, ideally till they understand. But
Yes.
if you are across the table, definitely we can make sure that yes, it is understood and he also understands. And once it is embossed, then it is not possible to be forgotten. But
Yes.
PowerPoint presentations also have limitations. And sometimes what we, rather, what I have felt is depending on the group who is attending, there could be a mix of the group. So when we used to conduct training in Voltas, we used to have people from installation, from service, from design, from construction who are actually doing the erection or procurement. So each of them has got a different point of view. So if I prepare a sort of lecture for only one group, will be it will be helpful. And at times, what we have seen is what is related to design is being explained to people who are not associated with that in their day-to-day activity. They lose interest. And the same thing happens when we start explaining about the installation practices or precautions to be taken to people who are in the sales. They get disinterested. So there is a disconnect. And our effort is to address to all the aspects. I have been saying this in our C.V. Raman College of Engineering, our Center of Excellence, that when we talk about, we should talk about from concept to commissioning, followed by maintenance, operation, and service. Because once the client has invested for the full money that he has invested, he is not just a project engineer completing the project and handing over. Client's interest is it has to run for the life without giving trouble with the minimum maintenance, because that is a cost attached to him. And also operation should be easy. So if we are looking at those aspects, even for one topic, like I'll give you an example. If I say a chiller, then the person who is installing would be interested in the physical size and how I'm going to rig and what is the weight of it. structural engineer might be having a different operating weights in his.
Yes.
Somebody who is in the procurement will be worried only about the price. Somebody will be worried about the piping connection. So
Yes.
for the same equipment, different people of the group would have different information or details required.
Yes.
And when you are explaining across, first you take a feel of what is the group, and then make sure that most of them are from one particular group. So you focus the aspects which they are interested in. Otherwise, what happens is the people start looking at the message received or a clock and something else in their mind. They start writing. So you have a disengaged group in the training. Then I have faced a lot of problems. Means while giving training. So that's why we decided that we must have a uniform group. That's the reason I tried to segregate the people who are in design, who are in installation, who are in operation and maintenance, and who are in service, because their point of view or the information which they require is different. Nobody will be worried about like a chiller package we were talking about, what is a pipe connection or whether it is on two opposite sides. If you have a 3-pass unit, you have inlet on one side and outlet on the other side. Your plant room entire planning has to be that way. So you must have a GA drawing for that, not the cost of that. So I give you the chiller cost for 200-ton chiller. This is the cost, and only one fellow will be happy. The others will be cursing me. I not given information. So depending on the requirement, we have to develop. And then personally, I feel it's easier to explain depending on the interaction, because many times what we have seen is people who are attending this also have some experience, some problems in their installations. And if they come up with those questions and we try to find an answer, we may not be able to give the answer immediately, but at least we can give a direction. Okay, you should go in this direction, you will find a solution. Even that guidance has helped many people.
Okay.
And depending on the interaction, we can always say, okay, we have noted the problem and we will send you the solution. Even that can be thought of. Most of the times, all the problems are faced by different groups, but they do not have a practice of sharing those.
Okay.
And if they are from the same company, same branch, 4 or 5 people, everybody working on a different project, they have faced same problem, and everybody finds the same problem by the other. Then if he had interacted earlier, he could have found the same solution much earlier. But everywhere you have to go and research and develop. So that's the reason personally I will be happier to conduct in-person sessions. Depends on how lucky I am to share that. And every time the presentation, same presentation, I have seen the same presentation, explanation given would be different. Depends on how receiving and how knowledgeable the group is. The way we interact becomes different.
Okay.
So personal, my preference is for classroom training for a specific group. But if we have to create something as a book, then it will become very difficult to have a same book for everybody. Otherwise, we have so many books already available. I can show you my library. But not that everything is useful every day. So
yeah,
that's what my feeling is.
Okay, sir. Good. Coming back to the other question is,
yes.
What are the topics we would be covering in this training session so that the professionals, HVAC professionals, it will be helpful for them?
From the point of view of HVAC engineer, what I would like to say is initially, if the contract which they are dealing with is just having the electrical related to the HVAC scope as a part of their work, then what is required is they have to identify the point of supply where it is coming. So there will be a single point power available for the entire HVAC. And from there, they have to make a complete distribution scheme up to the last point where it is required, which means there has to be a complete power distribution. You will have to create probably a main panel or a switchboard, depends on what you are calling it, or it could be a motor control center. The motor control center, when the word is used, we are expecting the interlocking between various motors as well as the starters as a part of the same panel. If it is only a power distribution panel or the main panel, it will not have any starters related to the motors. It will be only a power distribution switch gear. So switch gear will be a part of the scope. The motor control centers, how they are developed. Most of the times, we'll have to understand from each motor how the circuitry is developed,
Hmm.
because finally it becomes a group of motors which is fed from the main system. So basic, like if you have an air handling unit, there may be 10 air handling units, but the single air handling unit basic will not be different. So it is only the number which is multiplied. Same way when we have a group of pumps, if it is a duty and a standby, or two duty, one standby, or automatic changeover. So these are primary or basics which we can group, and
Hmm.
then each group will require a separate treatment.
Hmm.
Starter panels will have to be different.
Hmm.
There are VFDs which are becoming popular for the pumps and the air handling units or fans.
Hmm.
Even sometimes the compressor motors, they have part load, loading, unloading. So depending on the type of compressor, we have to decide how we are going to develop the power distribution. Then you will have a lot of components coming in: starters, contactors, relays, switches, circuit breakers, then interconnecting cables. It could be power cable, it could be armored, unarmored, different conductors. Depends on the specification. And
Hmm.
depending on the locations of all these, the routing will have to be finalized. Depending on the distances between the supply point and the consumer point. In this consumer point, what I mean is the location of a motor where
Hmm.
it is power is being consumed. So if that distance is far off, like if you have a building which is say 30 stories and the cooling tower is located on the 30th floor or the roof, and you have the main panel in the basement. So
Hmm.
30 floors height, that is the
Hmm.
kind of cable run.
Hmm.
And then if you have to size the cable, we have to take care of the voltage drop. So sizing the cable, selection of the cable, routing of the cable, if it is going in places where it is likely to be damaged,
Hmm.
mechanical damage, then you have to go for an armored cable because it has a built-in protection. If it is unarmored cable, you may have to run it in the conduit.
Hmm.
So how the aspects are, because every material which is on the list in the bill of materials
Hmm.
has a price implication,
Yes.
has a tag in terms of specification, and we have to be as per contract, number one, and number two, technically correct. At times we have seen wrongly spelled out in the contract.
Hmm.
If it is going to give a problem, it is better to identify that problem and the cost with that to find the correct solution.
Hmm.
And at times, although there is argument in the beginning with the client or the consultant, it might help, because if you are a knowledgeable person and you anticipate a possible problem and give a solution to it, not only raise the problem, then it always helps the overall installation and the project will get benefited. My overall approach will be to make sure that the project is done correctly
Hmm.
and with all the what we should say, full interest, so that the client has to live with that system for 15, 20 years,
Hmm.
and during that he should not have a problem. Our design delays in procurement, all that can find a solution, but a wrong design can never be found a solution. So my personal attention would be giving a correct design, be it uh, deviating from the contract. You can always deal with the price and time implication, but not a compromise on the correctness of the design.
Yes.
So my point of view is having the components listed, like your variable speed drive or the circuit breakers. There are, and we have to remember that all the electrical installations
Hmm.
generate heat. You take the smallest of our equipment, which is a electrical water heater switch in our house, and you keep it on in winter for a couple of hours, and you just feel that you will see that it is hot. So everywhere where we have the electrical conductor, we have a heating produced, and we must take care of the installation that we have to give a correct ventilation around the conductors. We have seen many times the cable are run in shafts which are not ventilated, and you go and touch the cable, it is heated and it gets derated. So it's not only one aspect, it's the overall system correctness of design, correctness of installation, and sizing the components correctly. If we start from concept to commissioning, then all of them will be addressed. And each of the equipment, being electrical, we have to be very, very fast in action. Imagine a situation between overload and the short circuit. That differentiation has to be there. So if it is a short circuit, you must isolate the circuit quickly enough that it doesn't cause any damage. And that's how all the circuit breakers are rated, or they have to be selected in that manner. Adjustments have to be done, and all the components, because electrical industry, that manufacturing industry, they have steps. Like after 63 amps breaker, you get 125 amps. In between, you don't have anything available. At times, you may have 80 or 100 amps, but that will be available from only few manufacturers, not everybody. So there are steps like this. Same thing happens in the circuit breaker. They have very large ranges, 400 to 630. Now, in between, if you have to adjust, there are adjustments. But all those have to be understood. And personally, I feel that having the good quality of catalogs of the products is always helpful, because catalogs of reputed manufacturers definitely give most of the technical information which is required for the designer or for the operator. Unfortunate part, what we have seen is everybody is sitting on a horse and trying to complete. They are always in a hurry to complete. And in our trainings, which we used to conduct for all our Voltas in-house trainings, we used to always say there is nothing urgent in engineering design. Everything is only important. If you see any of your ASHRAE handbooks, they will always say that this is an important aspect. Nowhere you will find the word urgent. Urgency is created by us because we are delayed in starting. Yes. And we want to run faster. That urgency is only for us. What is important is correctness of the design. That's my view. So having the knowledge of each component of the system helps in selecting the correct component depending on the application, and then you will not get a wrong installation, and you can sleep peacefully, that there will be nobody complaining for a faulty design.
What is that? Completely enlightened, sir. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Sir, the next question is regarding the techno-commercial bids or techno-commercial offer when they are submitting for the electrical aspects of HVAC. So what are the things normally what are the mistakes normally people do while quoting this particular scope? And what are the mistakes can be avoided to make it the work more effectively?
Many times what I have seen is the specifications which are provided by the consultants or the clients, they are not very comprehensive, and a lot of things are left to the HVAC contractor to assume. Now, many times what we have seen is the assumptions have to be listed out correctly, that these are our assumptions. So if we start with saying that, okay, I will assume that the power supply will be made available in every air handling unit room, which means I don't have to worry about the main panel location. And we say that, okay, the electrical contractor has to terminate the connection in air handling unit room within so and so distance. Because what happens is when the tenders are evaluated, most of them will go with the price first. The lowest price will get the invitation. And we will find that these assumptions, if they are not listed out clearly, then there will be a confusion, ambiguity, and scope of work will not be clear. Whereas somebody else might have said something different. They might have excluded a lot of things. So inclusions, exemptions or exclusions, what are to be provided by others, required to complete the system, and making at least one or two manufacturers name as a part of the list or approved equal, because many times availability could be a problem. We had a typical problem of availability from reputed manufacturers. If they get busy with some major orders, supplies are not readily available and it could hamper your project schedule. Then we must always have a or equal approved manufacturer listed. Ideally, we should give 3, 4 names in the beginning itself. And if you give all the repeated names, the client will select only the best of them or most expensive for us. And then we could be in trouble. So we should say, okay, or equal and approved. Now, who is approving that? Who will establish that it is equivalent? All those problems come. So we should give 2 or 3 names. Uh, Generally, nobody rejects the reputed manufacturers. So the prices and delivery schedules could be a challenge. So that is something which we must mention in the offers. Assumptions, as I said, there are cases where a lot of things are assumed to be free issue by the client. Many times, what is missed out is the cable trays for support or steel structure for supporting the panels, trenches, civil works, making civil openings or sealing of them around the cables after passage. If it is passing a firewall and we have got a big cutout for the cable entry, the remaining gap has to be sealed with the fire sealant. Many times the trouble starts with that and that becomes a pending point and can create a problem, because these are all items which are miscellaneous but definitely required as a part of the scope of work. So under electrical and mechanical or HVAC, if there is an overlap, scope of work has to be clearly identified where you are going to terminate. Are you going to just bring the cable? We had cases where he had brought the cable and left it, not even with terminals. Means the lugs also have to be provided by the HVAC contractor. And they were 300 plus cable sizes, not readily available. For a remote site, you can imagine what kind of hassle it could give. In one case, one tender, we had electrical panel for HVAC was written in the drawing, tender drawing, and it was written there by electrical contractor. So we did not price. And the electrical contractor, this panel was not shown at all in his drawing. And what is required also, no details were available. So since we said that this is by electrical contractor, we did not price. And afterwards, everything is ready, no panel. Then they started looking at the tender. Means clarity of scope of work. Once we identify that this is a requirement, first we have to say, okay, is it our scope? Or if it is not our scope, we have to mention that, yes, this is not our scope, but this is required. Please make sure that it is a part of the work. So there are cases, especially when we have an overlap. So we have to be careful. There are cases where the conduits are to be provided for the controls. You imagine a thermostat in the room of a hotel. Thermostat is a part of HVAC, but the conduiting which is concealed is to be done under civil, or the electrical contractor does the conduiting, and then it is to be used by us with a draw wire it is, and we draw the cable. So there are overlappings and missing links which need to be tied. And if the multiplier is big, then we could have a problem. Like if you have 300 fan coil units, so the cost will get multiplied by 300. So that's where we have to be a bit careful.